Hey, what's going on, everyone? Right. Put this guy in. Hopefully it's in. No, I kind of left it semi-unplugged on one of the shows. Kind of sucked. All right. Okay, cool. So we got these guys in here. Boom, boom. All right, so we'll give it a bit for some people to jump in, and then we'll rock and roll from there. Let's see, get these things adjusted. Kevin, what is going on? Let me know what you got going on this weekend, just how life is in general. We're going to just give it a bit for some people to jump in. I got Victor, what is going on? One of my favorite drinks to drink on the weekend. I actually try to have like maybe 3 of these a week. It's just a great source of probiotics, and honestly, they're really tasty. And they're only about $2.50 a can at I get them at Natural Grocers, but you could also find them at Whole Foods as well, and I'm sure a bunch of other stores, but that's the ones I've seen them at most often. And it's pretty cool. It's like a USDA organic certified brand, just very tasty. I think they have like 3 to 4 different flavors, and I've just been enjoying these. So not getting any kickbacks at all. Just happy to share these brands with you guys these organic brands that I've been enjoying. And one cool part about it too is it's in glass. So remember, I try my best to avoid drinking any liquids out of plastic whatsoever, just to kind of reduce your exposure to those microplastics. Okay, so that way you don't have an abundance of them in your body and stuff of that sort. So we'll just give it a bit. We're going to be talking about aesthetic development and how to select exercises when your goal is to build a beautiful physique, right? So that's the goal of a lot of people, definitely not everybody, but that's like one of the main motivations. It is called, that's one of the main motivations why I go to work out. Brew Doctor. You can find it. I get these at Natural Grocers, but you could also get them at Whole Foods, and I'm sure Sprouts probably sells them as well. All right, guys. So I'm going to get a quick sip. So we'll be talking about aesthetic development today. And this topic's kind of important for people that are going to the gym with their primary motivation of trying to visually transform their physique. And guys, just like with any other podcast, I say this often, it's really tough to give advice that's going to work for everyone, especially when you never met the person. Okay, so when doing these lives, obviously I have some former clients here on these lives, but most of the people I've never met personally, and I'll be happy to answer your guys' questions. But the problem is when I never met someone personally, it's really tough to give them advice because everyone is different. You don't know their injury history, you don't know their exact goals, their exact starting place, their experience, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really inevitably tough to give advice to people without knowing all that, and plus a lot of other information, their overall state of health and how much workload they can handle in the gym and stuff of that sort. So so just be careful when you listen to people online, even if they're credible, because even if they're credible, which is rare as well with online sources, they just never met you personally, so they don't know your exact situation. And before, like, I write any programs out for any of my clients, I spend like nearly 3 hours assessing them initially before the program is written out, and then also I have another hour assessment embedded within like the 4 month mark of the program too. So it's a total of like 4 hours worth of assessments and a lot of weekly accountability calls and a lot of checks and balances to make sure everything is done correctly, etc. Shush Ariam, I know I didn't pronounce that name correctly whatsoever. It's Brew Doctor, and you can find it at Whole Foods. I buy it like at Whole Foods or Natural Grocers, but I'm pretty sure you could look it up online and find it in a bunch of places. It's pretty well priced too, and it's in glass, and it's an organic brand as well. And I think it's like $2.53 where I am at, like after taxes and stuff. So it's pretty cheap. I try to have like like 3-ish of those a week, sometimes 4. It's just one great source of probiotics, of course, like kimchi and I have sheep yogurt as well. I'm a big fan of that, et cetera, et cetera. So guys, back to the message. I mean, just be careful with who you listen to online. Inevitably, they never met you, so they can't give you advice, especially when it comes to your mental and physical health. They can give you ideas that then you need to investigate further yourself and see if it applies to you. And you can use websites like pubmed.gov if you're more science-based and want to look at a lot of data, et cetera, et cetera. Or you can go take health courses yourself, which I highly encourage. You become your own mechanic, or just like hire a mentor with a good track record of success with applying it themselves, but more importantly, with applying it with a myriad of other clients that have a myriad of different challenges, and those clients accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, then most likely that kind of coaching or program would work for you as well. So another thing to look out for online is definitely avoid anyone that gives any absolute answers, because health and wellness, like mental and physical health and aesthetics, there are no absolute answers. There are no like, just do this one thing, just take this one supplement, just eat this one way, and you will be a success. And they don't even know what you're trying to be a success of, because they never even met you and they don't even know your core values and exactly what you're trying to accomplish, et cetera, et cetera. But the intricate details are very varied from person to person. The subject matter itself may not be overly complicated when it comes to a lot of health issues, but because you're dealing with individuals, and remember, nature is basically like a novelty generator. So it's not going to make two of anything. You know what I mean? Even there are no two similar droplets of water in an entire ocean. And of course, people are going to be much more varied as well, et cetera, et cetera. So proper assessment is important. Avoid anyone online that says anything in an absolute, like just follow this diet and it will work for you, et cetera, et cetera. Those are huge, 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 huge red flags and stuff of that sort. And definitely get, maybe watch those things for some general ideas, but I find also just a lot of that is very confusing for people and leaves them in more confusion after them hearing that information than before. So some things to consider, okay? But assessments and just thoroughly knowing what the person is trying to accomplish are going to be key. And of course, if you're looking for that, just send me a PM, and happy to book a consult call with you and see what's going on. So aesthetics, right? When your goal is to train for aesthetics, we're going to be specifically talking about which exercises like I personally use. Once again, it's tough for me to tell you guys like you need to do this because I don't know your injury history. I also don't know your specific goals and your weight training age. Okay, how long you've been lifting for, etc. Your lifting age, stuff of that sort. So it's important to know your goals, etc., etc. So, and what's more important actually than which exercise you select from, a lot of times people are very hyper-focused on finding a special type of exercise. And certain exercises are a little bit better to accomplish certain goals than others. But what's more important, what you have to figure out first before you figure out which exercise you select, are going to be how you develop your program design overall, okay? And that once again goes back to your goals, and everyone's programs are going to be different. And typically what you want to do is you want to divide your programs into kind of like your yearly goals. So first, of course, find out your exact goals, but then divide your program design into a weekly layout, which then flows into a monthly layout. Then that month usually flows into different segments and phases. So I had great success with ondulating periodization. You guys can Google it, and developing my programs like that so that they encourage enough biological adaptation, meaning you don't overuse your tissue and there's enough recovery to encourage progressive overload, which is another important thing. You want to set up your programs to gradually be getting stronger on certain lifts in a safe way, right? Because there's only like, for example, so big your chest is going to be if you keep like pumping out 30-pound dumbbells. So your program design has to encourage progressive overload in a safe way and allow enough biological adaptation to occur so that your tissue, especially your passive tissue, does not break down. Because if you have like a disc injury or a tendon injury or a ligament injury, those are going to be like very, very hard to recover from because they don't have a lot of blood circulating into those areas and stuff of that sort. So program design is very important before you select exercises. And you can't really even select which exercises to do until you figure out your program design, which once again is dependent upon your goals. So you got to be first and foremost very clear, crystal clear about what am I trying to achieve. In this case, since we're talking about aesthetics, like the ideal frame I like to aim for is to have like the stereotypical X-frame physique, okay? So it's like very wide shoulders, very narrow midsection, and medium width hips. That's just the type of look I like to aim for, and it's like a very well-balanced look. And it also, I do enjoy like an outdoor lifestyle as well, so it also has that flexibility of being able to be used in those environments too. So once again, find out your goals, design a program around those goals. I had, once again, great results with undulating periodization. So typically you have like an accumulation phase followed by an intensification phase. In each phase, I like to have them last for about 4 weeks, with the last week always being a deload week before transitioning into a new phase. And then when you get into a new phase, so the second phase always builds off the first phase. So it's important to kind of program them accordingly. I covered this in a lot of detail in another live. So if you need the link to that, just message me in the comments section and I'll send it to you after the live when I have access to it and stuff of that sort. But program design is important. It will take you time to learn it if you don't know it. But it's something important to do because you don't want to be wasting so much time at the gym, because you got to be at least, let's say, going to the gym 4 days a week. And then also you have to be fueling your body with the right amount of nutrition, right type of nutrition, and then right quantities depending on your goal as well. So you don't want to be wasting your time in the gym and then on top of that wasting your money on all that food to not have that great of results to show for it. And this is unfortunately pretty much like 99% of people that go to the gym. You can see it for yourself. Pretty much you'll see the same people at the gym, they're all the time, probably even more than you, definitely more than me, and they kind of look the same year after year, and most often just not that impressive to begin with, and they're not using their time efficiently, okay? And most likely because they're just winging it, they're just going there, and they don't have a program, or if they have a program, they're usually getting it for some clip online, which once again is a big mistake in most cases, and stuff of that sort. And they just don't have like a big world view on kind of their weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual goals. And most likely it stems from not even being clear about those goals, which is first and foremost the most important thing you want to iron out even before doing the program design. And the most important thing of all, where most people fail, and especially even at this point, believe it or not, guys, we're, I think, on the 11th or 12th of January, and already 40% of people have given up on their New Year's resolution goals. And by the end of January, just believe it or not, 30 days into a whole year, 80% of people have already given up on their New Year's resolution goals. Please don't be these people. And probably, you know, by month 2 or 3, it's more like 95%. And then back to business as usual. And it's the same thing, rinse and repeat year after year. And they kind of wonder why they're not going anywhere. So one way, I made a video on consistency as well. So I would recommend watching that. And that's absolute king, especially when it comes to building an aesthetically appealing physique. Because inevitably, 2 things. One, the human body, it's very high maintenance. So you have to have sustainable and consistent systems in place to make sure you're getting benefits from your workouts. Because if you work out 3 or 4 weeks very hard, but then you don't have a consistent, like a sustainable schedule that allows you to keep going with that, then you're going to take 3 or 4 weeks off. You're going to basically lose all your gains. You're going to get discouraged, etc., etc. So you want to set up systems in place that allow you to be consistent all year round, year after year after year. A general rule, like I found for myself, is 4 to 5 workouts for about 45 to 60 minutes a workout is way more than enough. So you got to figure out a schedule that will allow you to at least do that, depending on your goal. Okay, and without doing that, without being consistent, it doesn't really matter even if you have like the best program written out for you ever in the world. You're just not going to really reap the benefits of it whatsoever. And even if you do make short progress because you take large gaps of time off in between, you just quickly lose all your gains. And once again, it's just you're not gonna end up achieving anything impressive. So a quick hierarchy of needs. First, be very clear about what you're trying to achieve. So in this case, I wanted to achieve a beautiful X-frame physique, okay? Second, develop a program around that goal. And I would say third, figure out how to make your lifestyle so that program can be applied very consistently. So with lifestyle stuff, we covered this on a myriad of videos. I'm not going to really cover it here, but basically you got to factor in what kind of friends are you hanging out with? You know, are they taxing and draining you and distracting you? How about your work? That for sure will impact your workout. So if you're like at a toxic environment at work and you're there 8 hours a day, you know, don't expect to be so motivated all the time to then hit your workouts very hard. Or if you do hit your workouts, you're kind of very distracted because you're like thinking about like not enjoying work and stuff of that sort, or some annoying coworker that's bugging you or underhanded. There are a myriad of different circumstances. On the other hand, people could use the gym to help medicate themselves away from that type of environment. But once again, I would avoid using the gym as a form of medication personally. And I would maybe, if I don't like my job, find something new or find a new company to work for. Or like I'm a huge advocate of working remote. I think if, like in my opinion, if you can do it, you should. As long as you're health conscious, you can use the difference in time you save to basically attend to your mental and physical health goals, which to optimize for the average person, you need about, let's say 10 hours a week is realistic. You need about 4 to 5 hours for the workouts and then 4 to 5 hours for all the background stuff to sustain those workouts, such as grocery shopping, making the meals and all of that stuff. So, and you can get that 10-hour block by simply working remote, by not having to drive to work, or like make your hair every time. Like this is literally the only day out of the week I make my hair ever, and you guys see in the lives. I don't even do that consistently. I usually wear a baseball cap, and a lot of times just working remote will help save you, not a lot of times, pretty much most of the time, will help save you a tremendous amount of time. And you can, once again, if you're health conscious, allocate that time difference to your mental and physical health goals. And also, just as a side bonus, it can do wonders by like avoiding the chitter chatter gossip at work. You can actually be far more productive. I've done a live, one of my good friends from middle school, Dimitri Arhipo, he's like a PhD computer programmer that's a big advocate for remote work, especially in that field. And we chatted for like 2 hours or something like that. I forgot exactly already, about the various advantages of doing remote work for your mental and physical health. Other things are like, you know, less chances of getting in a car accident because you don't drive to work. Like I spend right now also with gas, like maybe $20 every 2 months on gas. Okay. Every 2 months, that's like $10 a month on gasoline. And plus the wear and tear on your car is far less. Again, the big thing is really avoiding those chitter chatter, gossipy coworkers. I think that could really allow you to create a good mental headspace as well. But the big advantage is you just have more free time. And if you're smart, you'll allocate that extra free time to your mental and physical health, which is going to be so important because it's going to benefit you so much because you only have one mind, right? And one body. And remember, your mental and physical health always acts as a ceiling to your happiness in life. So, however, let's say you're at a C with your mental health and you're at an A+ everywhere else in life. Great job, great money, you're sought after in your community, whatever. Your quality of life is still at a C, 100% guaranteed. But if your mental and physical health, and you're honest about it, is at an A, then your quality of life is at an A, okay? Uh, Et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't honest about their health. They say like they're doing well, but they've been doing so poorly, they kind of start creating these cognitive dissonance, start creating lies, basically, and then they force themselves to believe those lies as truths. And then they create so many of them over the years. I've seen this happen so often that then they get confused what's true and what's a lie, and it's a disaster. It's kind of like quicksand. They slowly start sinking into it, but then they sink into it indefinitely. It's always sad to see because they justify it in like so many different ways, and they've unfortunately been kind of tricked into believing what's not important is important. What is important, which is your mental and physical health, is like the least important, and they'll put everything ahead of that, which is sad to see. But that's a different topic. So today, but it's important to cover it because you guys, without those three things in place, without knowing your goals thoroughly, without having a good program to achieve those goals, you're not going to have good results. And if you're not going to have good results, you're not going to be motivated to continue to do it, right? Et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of like going to work and not getting paid. How long are you going to keep going to work for? You know, it's the same thing with workouts. If you're clear on your goal, but then your programming sucks, or your action plan sucks on how to achieve those goals and you don't have the results, you're not going to continue either. And also, if you're clear on your goals and you have a great program for those goals, but don't have a way to consistently apply that, in the sense you don't have a sustainable lifestyle, then you're going to fail again, you know, and again and again, and get discouraged eventually and do something like blame your genetics or something silly of that sort, and then just be bitter, et cetera, et cetera. So I say those things because they are so important. And without laying that foundation with those three principles, among a couple of other things, like you're just going to fail. And there's no point of starting because you're just going to waste time and get discouraged. So make sure you're very clear on those three before even worrying about what kind of exercises you need to do, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so Daryl, analysis by paralysis, right? So in that case, maybe getting a mentor would help you, you know, or getting a course that already has a solid layout for what you're trying to achieve, and then just copy and paste in their process, and then learning to customize those little details to your specific needs as time goes on. Because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know, and there are a lot of people out there that know way more than you and way more than me. And that's why I hire mentors plenty of times. I'm going to be hiring 2 this year. I'm even taking a online course right now. So I try to do at least like 1 online course or 2 a year, and then hire a mentor every year too. On top of trying to read at least 2 books a month as well. Because there are many people out there that just know a lot more than you, and you could only come up with plans for what you know. So if you don't know it, it's going to be tough to come up with the plan for what you need to know and stuff of that sort. So with aesthetic development, damn, 30 minutes already in, and we haven't even talked about exercises. So let's dive into that now. But with aesthetic development, I'm just going to break it down into different body parts, and then we'll go from there. And once again, it's really tough for me to give you guys individual advice. So I'm going to just tell you what works for me to accentuate these muscle groups as much as possible aesthetically and visually, which is one of my main goals. That's kind of just how I like to train. And it's one training method that I never have to motivate myself to do as well. So that's another important thing you guys want to do some self-inquiry on what could I do and what do I really genuinely like the most that will require the least amount of discipline, you know, to do, because you actually just enjoy it and it doesn't really require a lot of motivation. It's just easy to do, you know? So with quads, honestly, for the most part, the 2 variations I stick to are the leg press and the hack squat. I find these exercises amazing. With the leg press, I try to always have the chair inclined way down as much as the machine would allow. There are some machines that are a little bit better than others. The one I have at my gym currently is pretty good. So it goes like pretty much way down. And the reason of that is you can extend the range of motion far more, okay? In terms of the foot placement, On the leg press, I vary it up quite a bit depending on the phase I'm in. But typically, I like to kind of experiment with more of a sumo stance and also more of a narrow stance. So when you're kind of like at a wider stance in the leg press, it's really good at creating that teardrop within the inner portion of your leg, okay? That very bulky piece of muscle on the front of the leg, which when developed actually does create a very good aesthetic appeal to the quad. And if your kind of legs are much closer in, then you're putting a lot more emphasis on the outer sweep. I think both of them are important to develop to really have that kind of wider look to the quad from the front view that looks very nice, kind of like a very nice teardrop on the inside and a very nice sweep on the outer portion of the quad. In terms of the foot placement, just the lower you go, you got to find out what works well for you, but the lower you go, the more emphasis you're going to put on the quad, where the higher you go, it's going to be a bit divided between the quadricep and also the hamstring as well. So for me, I like to stay, I found for me, at least I'm like 6'2", so the way the machine works at my gym is somewhere in the middle works great, whether it's sumo stance, narrow stance, or mid stance, okay? And another important thing is when you are lifting weights, I find that I want to avoid just moving weight back and forth. And I think this is so important personally, is that you establish and you learn how to create voluntary contractions through a solid mind-muscle connection with the muscle you're trying to target. So in this case, it's like the quad, right? So I am actually voluntarily flexing the quad as hard as I could, as hard as I can, the entire time. And I am using the external weight then to facilitate that contraction that I am already creating voluntarily. This is huge in the sense that I do notice way better pumps during my workouts. I do notice the workouts are typically feel far more intense because you really get that deep burn in the targeted muscle. I also notice you are able to keep the tension in the muscle much better so that the tension doesn't go to your joints. You're not feeling it in your knees, for example, as well. And there's also the safety factor. When you're so hyper-focused and keeping that continuous muscle tension in the targeted muscle, the entire set, just the chances of injury are just going to be far, far less. In fact, personally, I've never seen anyone actually get injured training that way. Most people in the gym that I see ever get injured are typically just throwing the weight back and forth. They don't really have a voluntary contraction. They're using an external weight to create that contraction. Yes, there are people with way better physiques than me that do that, and I'm sure that lift way more weights. But on average, what I've seen is most of the injuries just come from that kind of. I wouldn't even say ego lifting, because ego lifting is just with poor form as well. Some people that just throw weight around could actually do it with good form too. But the intention or the difference is that I'm creating a voluntary contraction with the quadricep in this case, and using the external weight to facilitate that contraction versus just moving the leg press back and forth, etc., etc. And a little other trick I try to use is I make sure I don't have any break in tension in the targeted muscle group the entire set. I find this to be so important for safety, also just to accentuate the size of the muscle. And that means I am voluntarily contracting the entire time, but also using a range of motion that allows me to keep the tension in the targeted muscle group the entire time. So if I get to a position in the movement where I lose tension, that means possibly I'm thinking that it's out of my flexibility range. So I'll just stop short before that. And you could stretch a little bit and stuff of that sort later on, kind of more of a longer term strategy, but there's only so much you can do for stretching. It just depends on your limb length and build and stuff of that sort in general. So I try to incorporate all of that. And obviously to have that deep focus, deep mind muscle connection, you need to be well rested. You can't be annoyed by this chattery coworker at work or whatever, and it's kind of distracting you then while you're working out. You need to be in the zone. I find just having earphones and great music to really help create that mental bubble around you. And I also typically wear a baseball cap in the gym too. Luckily, my gym, during the time I go, there's just literally nobody there. But if you're going to a more crowded gym, you don't want to be distracted by a lot of scenery. So I try to wear a baseball cap fairly low. That way you don't make eye contact with anyone, and you're really kind of just forced to be in a tunnel in terms of just focusing on your next set and stuff of that sort, which is another important thing, you know. Try to definitely have your phone on airplane mode during the workouts. That way you're not distracted, especially if you're in management type positions. That's huge. You don't want to be getting work emails and dealing with that drama and stuff of that sort. Your gym time is your me time, okay? Focus on you and get the most out of your hour, because if you're not going to do that, just go do something else, because you're not going to get any results anyways, because it requires you don't need to train to absolute failure every set, but it requires you to push the physique to a new level, because inevitably having a muscular physique is not natural for the Homo sapien body and genetics. Okay, so to really push it to that muscular frame, you're really going to have to push the physique to a new level of intensity. And to do that, especially to do that safely, you're going to have to be hyper focused and really in the zone, have a good game plan, etc. Be clear about your core values and have a sustainable lifestyle that allows you to, sleep 8 hours a day, possibly take naps, especially if you're in your 40s. Have the proper nutrition, etc., etc. Not drink alcohol, all that stuff. If you're not going to do all that, it's just, in my opinion, you're just not going to have great results. And because you're not going to have great results, you're going to get discouraged, because it takes time and effort. And if you're putting in that time and effort and not getting anything in return, I just don't see you being consistent. Nor do I see many other people being consistent. Yeah, there's the guy that goes to the gym and you see them there all the time and they look the same. And I don't know, I guess there's an exception to everything, but it's just what I see, what people fall off of is they just don't have the results to show for the amount of effort they're putting in. So all those little things, paying attention to so in between sets, try not to watch the TV. Like what I'm doing is I'm focusing on my next set. How many reps do I have? 10. Okay. How's the last set that I did on the leg press? How did it look? Oh, I felt it really good on my quads and kept it perfect in position for the first 8 reps, but then the quads started burning a lot and my technique was a little teeny bit off on those last 2 reps. So what could I do on the next set to maybe push off my heel a little bit harder, have a little bit more maybe core stiffness. Maybe I could brace a little bit and have a little bit more stiffness there towards those last 2 reps, or maybe the whole set, et cetera, et cetera. All these little things and this internal dialogue is so important. This reflection in between sets is so important. And when you are doing the set, that internal dialogue has to exist still as well. So like, let's walk through 10 reps. Let's walk through like 8 reps on the leg press to do it a little faster. So when I'm thinking before I begin, I already know I'm going to finish all 8 reps. There's no question about it. And I'm selecting a weight that makes it almost impossible to do like 9 or 10 reps to begin with. So I know it's going to be tough, but in my mind, I already know I'm going to finish this set to the end, no matter what. And there's no question about it. Now I'm rehearsing really quick before I begin, because if you mentally run through an exercise, the second time you're doing it, you're mentally doing it twice already, okay? So the intensity output is going to be much better that way. So on the next set, I'm thinking, before I do it, okay, how are the first 2 reps? So the first 2 reps are going to be pretty good. Darn, there isn't that much lactic acid buildup. I'm going to make sure to push heavily off of the heel of my foot, have those knees in a perfect positioning, etc., etc. My goal is to really blast the quads and to get to pretty much concentric failure by the time I hit 8 reps, or maybe 1 rep remaining for safety, etc., etc. And now what am I going to do for rep 6? Okay, rep 6, the burning is going to be pretty crazy. So what I'm going to do then is just hyper focus, brace a little bit harder, push harder off of my heel to make sure the weight doesn't creep up to my toe. And then I'm just going to push through it. And then I do the set with all of that already rehearsed. Okay. And then I put the weight back and then I start rehearsing. Okay. How was that set? What can I do on the next set? Of course, the first 30 minutes or 30 seconds or so, you're going to be pretty out of breath. So take that in consideration too. But after that settles down, of course, then you got to start the rehearsal process. Boom, boom, boom. Maybe another cool thing I try to do, especially in a tough set, is turn on a really good song. So that perfect time in the song hits right when you start that set, and it gets you to kind of like be more pumped up and stuff of that sort. There's so many little things you can do, and it's individual by individual basis, basically. But you got to find what works for you. And I found out all this stuff over many years. Even little things like just wearing really warm pants on colder days in the gym, or just on leg days in the gym in general, gives you a better pump, I found. Because once again, it's a hotter environment, so there's more blood circulating into there, and you can get warmed up faster as well. So ironically, I just use what's the name? What's the company name? I think it's called like KIUI. I forgot exactly, but they're hunting pants, and they're built like really nice insulation inside already. And it could be like 10 degrees in the gym. It's actually, my legs are freaking pretty hot, et cetera, et cetera. So some things to consider. I don't do barbell back squats, and I don't do deadlifts for legs. I just personally found them not as effective. I mainly stick to the leg press and the hack squat, simply because if you think about it, a barbell back squat, I'm sure it's not what you do, it's how you do it too. So keep that in mind. But a barbell back squat, you load your spine, which if that's one of your goals, to be able to load your spine with quite a bit of weight, that's a different story. But once again, I'm just really trying to hyper focus and develop really nice looking big dense quads, right? So when you are loading the bar on your back, inevitably all of that weight has to travel through your spine before your quads are able to be stimulated, right? And what happens there is inevitably you're limited by the strength of your back too. And you inevitably always have to overload your back, but typically underload your quads as well, because your legs and your butt can definitely move way more weight than your back can, right? So you're kind of limited from that perspective. So you have to be, if you do barbell back squats, you just have to be very, very careful with your technique. That's so important. I've seen so many people injure their back with doing barbell squats and barbell deadlifts, simply because there's a lot of training that needs to go into mastering the technique in those movements as well. And most people just don't have that training. So just really kind of sticking to the leg press is much easier to coach people on. And I just think also putting the weight much closer to the targeted muscle group is advantageous as well. And you can typically then overload the legs without even having to deal with weight distribution throughout the back on the leg press, and it's much safer. The one thing with the leg press, for example, is that of course, you want to be careful to make sure your tailbone does not round off of the pad, right? Because that's going to put a tremendous amount of shear strain on that L5, L4 discs of the lower back. The L5 disc injury is the most common orthopedic injury ever. Very, very common. But if you just stop before that happens, there's not that much pressure I found on the lower back, if any at all. Once again, from my observation in the gym, I just see a lot of people injure the low back doing barbell back squats and barbell deadlifts. There are safe ways to do them for sure, and they are effective for a lot of people. It's just you really need a lot of coaching to be able to do those exercises appropriately, and then just be very, very focused all the time when you're doing them, and being very, very careful, etc., and stuff of that sort. So I just found much better results with doing the leg press and the hack squat, and the quads just look much, much bulkier without having to overload the back. There's a lot more we can go into there, but I notice we're already at 43 minutes, and I want to cover some other muscle groups here. So let's cover, let's cover the chest, okay? So for chest training, I just found, honestly, just doing machine work to once again be superior to free weights most of the time. So like an incline Smith machine press for the chest, for example. I always try to start my chest workouts with an incline pressing motion as well, personally, because I find that I just have like a flatter upper chest. And I find like most males do have this. So if your goal is to fill up the upper chest, it might be advantageous to always start your chest days with an upper pressing type movement. And I think angles are very important and often missed with chest training movements. So for example, when you are doing a chest press, so first and foremost, you want to have your shoulders down and back. You definitely, I'm going to move to the side here, you definitely don't want to be pressing with your elbows very far up like this. This is going to put a tremendous amount of shear strain on that anterior delt, especially when you are laying on a bench that's restricting your shoulder complex from moving freely. And just the way the weights are coming down is just going to put a lot of shear stress on that anterior delt. So cause a lot of typical wear and tear on the shoulder. Also, typically when you are pressing up high like that, you end up feeling the entire workout in your shoulder instead of your chest, which you're trying to target. So what I try to do personally is, let's say I'm doing an incline press, right? I'm bringing my shoulders down and I'm bringing them back. And what I'm doing here, and you got to experiment for your individual dimensions, but what I'm doing here is bringing the elbow to about a 45-degree angle. Some people need to be a little bit tighter. Some people can be a little bit higher, but you need to find what works well for you. But definitely try to avoid having your elbows up very high up. Another important thing to remember, and these are intricate little details, you can go on bench pressing technique for like hours and hours and hours, but just a very common one I'm seeing is, I'm going to demonstrate it from this angle, is people, when you are pressing, try to make sure your upper arm, my chair just unlocked, try to make sure your forearm rather is perpendicular to the ground the entire time. So you don't want to, like for example, on a dumbbell press, it's easier to demonstrate. But you know, sometimes when you press in with a dumbbell, your forearm is kind of collapsing like this. You know what I mean? You want to have your forearm out. So in a sense, what you want to try to imagine like you're doing, you're creating kind of like a fly type motion, even with your pressing type motions. It should kind of mimic almost like a dumbbell fly. Like that's an easy one to explain, okay? You want to avoid just pressing straight up and down. It's moreover like a fly type movement, okay? Fly type movement with the pressing motions. That's what's going to really help your chest develop a lot better. So once again, just avoid collapsing the forearm, especially at the end. It will for sure allow you to press more weight, definitely. But remember also, you're not trying to be a good weightlifter here. You're trying to aesthetically develop your physique. Inevitably, you do want to progressively overload and get stronger on all your lifts, but you don't want to prioritize strength over feeling it deep in the muscle. That's going to be the most important thing. You want to really feel it deep in the muscle, et cetera, okay? And really get that deep mind-muscle connection. Unless you're extremely genetically gifted, I just don't see how the muscle would develop visually and with good density by just, once again, moving the weight back and forth and just concentrating more on gaining strength versus, once again, feeling it deep in the muscle, which I think is, in my opinion, like the most important thing for safety, but also for aesthetics as well. And a lot of times I feel like when you're not keeping that tension in the muscle, inevitably that tension from the lift has to go to your joints, okay? And there's only so many years that could happen in a row until you start developing arthritis and joint pain and all that stuff. So another thing with pressing techniques, what I found really helped me personally is, obviously I'm bringing my shoulders down and back. I'm also creating like a fly type movement with my pressing motions. But what I like to do is, I imagine like my shoulders are wrapping, like my rear delts are wrapping around the bench, kind of like a bow. Like imagine like a bow, like an arrow, bow and arrow, right? Wrapping around the bench. And I don't bring my shoulders forward in the press. So what I mean by that is, when I'm pressing, I don't then go like this. You know what I mean? Most people don't, but they tend to kind of slouch forward a little bit towards the end there. So what I do when I'm pressing, I keep my shoulders down, back, and as I'm pressing, notice my elbows aren't flared out. Notice my forearms are perpendicular to the ground the entire time. As I'm pressing, I'm keeping those shoulders back the whole time, okay? Kind of tough to demonstrate on this chair, but that's also just very important. These little cues are huge and stuff of that sort, okay? So exercise selection, once again, the main thing is you want to turn your pressing movements into like a fly type movement, get those elbow positionings in right, etc., etc. And always start with the part of your chest you feel is lagging the most. So for me, it's upper chest. So I start with an upper press type movement. And then usually I just do like a press type movement, right? But once again, press in the sense of trying to simulate that fly type movement. And then usually do like a pec deck machine or something of that sort as a finisher. Once again, it varies, but just to give you guys some ideas and stuff of that sort. So in terms of pressing too, some little cues that could really help with aesthetic development are, once again, kind of rehearsing your set like we did with the leg press before you actually begin, okay? And just running through your head how each individual rep will look and how each individual rep will feel and how you could really optimize the technique of each rep. Each rep has to be perfect, okay? So no micro movements, meaning the bar is wobbling horizontally, no distortions of your joints when you're trying to finish it. All these things are so important. And I wanted to say one thing, but kind of forgot exactly. Well, I forgot exactly, but I'll remember it later, I'm sure. But these little things are very important. Just moving weight back and forth, once again, it's not going to produce great results. And also, it's probably going to increase your chance of injury quite a bit as well. So it's important to take these things into consideration. Oh, yes, I'd remembered. So when you are like pressing, for example, let's say an easy one is the incline barbell press, right? So a lot of times you'll notice people just lift the weight off very, very quickly, and it kind of creates a little bit of wobbling and shaking. And this is a terrible way to start the set. So when you are lifting the weight, the bar off of the rack, it's slow. So first of all, I really flex the chest as hard as I can, and I lift that weight off of the rack with my chest. And then I hold, stabilize the bar at the very top for a split second where there's no movement whatsoever, and then initiate the movement. And in my head, at the entire time, I'm like, okay, keep the tension in the chest on the way down, and then use the chest on the press on the way up. Keep the tension on the chest on the way down, then press with the chest on the way up. And then I stop on the last rep at the top for a split second, and then re-rack. I don't kind of re-rack into it because you do have a higher chance of missing one of the pins, and that can be, especially on an incline press, quite painful on your face if a bar fell on your face like that. So some things to consider, okay? So that's with the chest. I also like to incorporate with the chest a lot of cable type movements, but not from a standing position. It's usually like on a bench so that your central nervous system can hyper focus on just really contracting the chest instead of stabilizing your whole body from a standing position and then having to flex your chest. You'll notice the contractions are probably going to be much more intense if like you're on a chest doing a cable fly, whether it's flat, incline, etc., versus standing and doing a cable fly from that position where you have to like balance and then counter the weight, etc., with your whole entire body and stuff of that sort. And it leaves less room for really feeling it deep in the chest. So some things to consider. So with shoulders, honestly, in the past, I relied heavily on overhead pressing, and I still do them as a supplement. But really, the main movement I focus on for developing really wide shoulders and really good density in the shoulders are basically dumbbell laterals and some type of reverse raise for the rear delts as well, usually with the reverse pec deck machine or some type of cable reverse pec fly type movement, reverse fly type movement with a cable machine and stuff of that sort. I also found just using the, not every gym has it, but just using the shoulder lateral machine, pretty amazing on developing the sweep and the good density in the medial head as well. Simply because it helps keep the tension in the muscle the entire time a lot easier than with dumbbells. But that's not to say you can't do it with dumbbells. Once again, you can simulate that voluntary contraction with dumbbells and still achieve that same feeling of continuous tension all the way through. It just requires a bit more training and a bit more focus. So either or would work. Once again, oftentimes it's not like what you do, it's how you do it. And as long as you're really exhausting the muscle and taxing it, that's going to be the most important thing from an exercise perspective. So, and then also just, doing the reverse pectic. I love that for building density in the rear delts. Because honestly, when your rear delts look pretty dense, especially when you combine that with really developed the medial shoulder, it really gives your shoulder quite of a bulky appearance, especially if you supplement that with then a really good developed tricep that has a very nice sweep and density to it. All of a sudden your arm starts looking like very, very big and bulky. But if you kind of lack those rear delts, it makes your shoulder, especially from the side profile or when you turn your arm inward, just look very flat and undeveloped. So some things to consider there. But it's all about like your starting place. You got to know like how you're currently looking and which muscles are already overly developed and which muscles are underdeveloped and need to be caught up, so that way you have good symmetry and balance in your physique. So this is all individual. Everyone is looking different. But one good thing about developing really wide shoulders, I think it's like a must for any men, because it makes your midsection look that much more narrow the wider your shoulders are. But if you are the type that has a more of a rectangular or square-like build, there's only so much you can do with fat loss, right? Because at a certain point, let's say you're already on the leaner side, 12% body fat, and you still have this square shape, then the only thing you really could do is just accentuate the size and width of your shoulders a lot, and then probably your lats as well. And that could make your midsection look much more narrow. That way you don't have to, starve yourself to have a very, very thin midsection and stuff of that sort. And you could be at a reasonable body fat percentage, like a healthy body fat percentage, but still have a very lean looking midsection, because visually the shoulders are much wider than the midsection. So, all right. So with biceps, my two go-to are going to be like a 60-degree incline dumbbell curls. You do different variations, like a supinated grip, so it's like this, a neutral grip as well. Typically don't do pronated grip on there, but that 60-degree will help give you a really good stretch. I personally don't like the 40-degree angle a bit more, because it's a bit more of a weird setup, but 60-degree works really well for me, providing that long stretch in the bicep. And what was I going to say? I spaced out again. But 60-degree incline curl, and then another thing I like to do as well is just the preacher curl with the easy bar, or sometimes with dumbbells as well. Just those two, just variations of those two movements. That's typically what I do. Maybe I throw in another movement just for fun, but it's really just those two movements are the go-to, and then you just want to kind of progressively get stronger on those two movements as you go up and up. If your biceps are a top priority of development, like they're really lacking, it might be a good idea for you to do them first in the workout. But usually what I do is I do them at like very last in the workout. Okay. So triceps, that's another big one too. The movements I like for tricep the most are honestly like a 45 to 60 degree bench, and you have a cable overhead extension with the ropes. Just kind of being able to keep those elbows in very tight and extending with a grip of a neutral grip basically in your hands, and extending your arms like this. So basically just imagine you're on a bench that's about 45 degrees or 30 degrees. Okay. The cable is right behind you and you're like this, you're kind of leaning back, and I try to position my upper arm as perpendicular to the ground as possible. And then I extend up, boom, boom, quite a bit. I even feel it just doing it like that without any weight at all. And I try to imagine, like I have a mental image of like a rubber band around my elbows, and they're pulling them in. That rubber band is really hard, and it's really pulling my elbows in. And that really helps contract the triceps quite hard without having to use so much weight, okay? So you're getting those very deep deep contractions. You could also, if it's too cumbersome to get set up in the gym, you could also do that movement with dumbbells as well. But the cable is nice because it keeps that continuous tension in the muscle the entire time, which is ideal in my opinion for developing a muscle aesthetically. But you could also do that with dumbbells as well. It just requires more focus and voluntary contraction, especially as you get to the top, because you don't want to, what I see a lot of people doing is they get to the top and then they kind of lock out and then they release the tension in that targeted muscle group. But you want to get to the top, squeeze that tricep as hard as you can. Like I imagine like rinsing water out of a towel, at the very end, you kind of just squeeze and then maintain that flexion on the way down and then exaggerate that flexion on the way up again. I try to do that with every muscle, not just the triceps. That's just the general rule I try to follow. So boom, boom. All right, so for back, two movements that I found to be extremely promising for me are weighted pull-ups, and I do all three grips, so supinated, pronated, neutral, and I just bought like a weight chain belt on Amazon for like $15, and I wrap dumbbells around that chain and do it weighted that way. I found that to build really good looking dense and wide lats. Typically, like the pull-ups will work on the width of your back, whereas some type of row type motion will work on the density of your back. But I found actually weighted pull-ups to do a pretty good job at creating density in the lats as well. So my go-tos for the back are basically weighted pull-ups and getting progressively better at them. I've worked up to like a 100-pound dumbbell for 4 reps now, and I'm 205 pounds already, So that's 305 pounds of intensity or pressure on the lats during the pull-up as well. I guess one important note to make is inevitably you're going to be using your bicep in a pull-up movement too, but I found just really getting that deep voluntary contraction to be so important, and using your lats to pull you up, not using your arms. Okay, so it's a little different. So what I found worked well for me is just, once again, bringing your shoulders down, back, and really flexing those lats, voluntarily squeezing those lats as hard as you can, and then using those lats to pull you up, getting that deep squeeze at the very top in those lats, and then once again maintaining that flexion on the way down, not releasing the tension in the lats at all. And the cool thing about developing the lats in particular, they're the biggest muscle group in your upper body. So if you feel like you are lacking size in your upper body, especially compared to your legs, which I've had a problem with in the past, just developing really dense, wide lats will give your upper body a much bigger and more dense appearance. And it also just is a great view from a posterior view, and just also lets you to fit your clothes a lot nicer too. So it kind of really stretches them out in the right areas. So something to consider there. And then for the row, I just love the hammer strength, row. And once again, the grips I vary usually from neutral to pronated. Typically don't do supinated on that one unless it's just messing around from time to time. But that one is great, and you don't have to like overload once again your lower back and stuff of that sort. I haven't seen any good results with doing deadlifts for building more density in my back. These are the two main movements, and I try to really just progressively overload on these movements over time. And once again, really just have a deep, deep mind-muscle connection. I really can't stress the importance of that. I really avoid just moving weight back and forth, and I just establish that deep mind-muscle connection and use that external weight to facilitate that connection. So that's back. Let's cover some abs. So a lot of times people ask with abs with the thought of like there's an ab exercise that's going to get your abs to look ripped. Really just having ripped abs first and foremost is always just having a low body fat percentage. So typically you want, like for males, 10% or below to have visual like ripped abs. For exercises, honestly, like for me personally, I really don't do anything fancy. I do a stability ball, a Swiss ball dumbbell crunch. So I have like a dumbbell on my chest and I do a Swiss ball dumbbell crunch. And then I also incorporate some type of wood chop, cable wood chop type motion. So it could be like in the middle or high to low or low to high or stuff of that sort, and just progressively overload that angle as well. And that's it. I just have basically variations of those two movements. And I just, once again, try to get really good at them in the sense of A, knowing how to do a really deep mind muscle connection, and B, just progressively using more and more weight. Because inevitably, if you keep changing your exercises up so much, you'll never be able to progressively overload the muscle. It's kind of like work, you know? If you keep changing your occupation every other month, you're not going to get good at what you're doing. And it's the same thing with weightlifting. You should have some core movements that typically never change, and then some supplementary movements that you can change as well, just to have a little bit more resilience in your physique. And then also, you know, you're dealing with the human mind, so you have to have novelty to keep the workouts interesting as well. But you really just need a few core lifts, and just to get really damn good at those lifts. And once again, really consistent. Consistency is king with physique development, because if you're not consistent, you're just not going to hold on to your muscle at all, even if you manage to put it on. So you got to create a sustainable lifestyle that makes it easy for you to go to the gym and have at least 45 to 60 minutes in the gym of focused, intense work, 4 to 5 days a week. So if your schedule doesn't allow that, that should be your first objective, is to figure out how to create a schedule that allows that without you being overly stressed or having to cut back on your sleep. If you cut back on your sleep, there's no way you're going to have the recovery necessary to build muscle. Your injury risk is going to go up as well quite a bit. And it's just not good for your mental or physical health to the average American is getting like 5 hours of sleep a night. That's pretty terrible, okay? So you want, at least if you're training hard and you already have like a muscular body, or even if you're trying to develop muscle, you want to be sleeping at least 8 hours a day. I try to also get in like a 20-30 minute nap after every single one of my workouts as well. So stuff of that sort. So got to take that in consideration. But with abs, that's it. You know, stability ball ab crunch, boom. With the dumbbell on my chest, sometimes I make it tougher by putting like a dumbbell over my head like this. That's really tough angle. And then also like a wood chop variation. But the main thing is I try to keep my spine in my lower spine, the 5 vertebrae in that lower back, in a neutral position as I'm doing ab work. So you can do that with like a roller, any wood chop variations, stir the pots, dead bugs, stability ball crunch, Wusa ball crunch, stuff of that sort. You want to avoid kind of doing ab exercises that lock the hips in place, and then you're forced to bend at the lower back. That's what's going to delineate the material of the discs, that annulus fibrosis material, and eventually you'll have a disc herniation. So some examples or exercises I've done myself in the past is like a decline bench sit up, you know, where your hips are locked into the bench and you're basically just bending at your lower back. That's going to really do a number on those discs of the lower back, so you want to avoid those. And also some machines, ab crunch machines, that lock your hips in place and you're crunching, you're kind of flexing and extending just at the low back. You want to ideally pick exercises that keep your spine in a neutral position, and you're still able to engage the musculature in the core that you're trying to engage. So 2 exercises that do that are the stability Swiss ball crunch, which I do, in the cable core rotation. But some other exercises are like various farmer's carries, suitcase carries, which are good for the obliques, and the roller as well, stuff of that sort, okay? Notice all those exercises, the spine is staying straight as you're working your abs. That's the key. So with calves, a lot of people, including myself, actually have trouble building up their calves. So if calves are a concern, one thing you can do is actually train them first. Every day you work out, or 3 days a week, or whatever. You got to figure out what works for you. You don't need to put in a tremendous amount of volume, just like 4 or 5 sets. You know, just get a good pump and progressively overload before you begin the workout. Because I find if you do calves at the end of every workout, nothing seems to happen unless you already have genetically gifted calves that are really dense and proportionate and stuff of that sort. So the two I stick to are standing calf raises and seated calf raises. And to be honest, I actually do, I try to do the standing calf raise sometimes with like a Smith machine, but you have to put a plate. I typically have those Olympic plates, so they're very dense under the bar area, so that way you can get good range of motion with your foot, etc., etc. But I just do it on there simply because my gym on the calf machine, the weights don't go up to that much, and I've already kind of surpassed the weight capacity of that machine. But if you haven't, just doing the standing calf press machine is amazing, and also following it up with the seated as well. So just sticking to those two movements, but once again, progressively overloading those movements. And in order to do that, you have to be consistent, you know? So it all goes back to what I said in the beginning: clear about your goals, have a good program to make sure you're hitting those goals and having good results. That's what's gonna keep you motivated. And then having a sustainable lifestyle and schedule to allow you to do all of that easily without cutting back on sleep or too much cutting back on social life or whatever, which might mean some people may need to look for a new job, you know, or stuff of that sort. And that's just, if that's important for you, then that's something you would have to consider and do. Because if it's not sustainable, it's not going to be consistent. If it's not consistent, consider you're not going to have great results, and then you're going to get discouraged and stuff of that sort. So, and that's it, you know, those are the movements I kind of stick to, and variations of those movements. It's not too complicated. I think consistency is king. I can't really stress that enough. I say that, it sounds boring. I know it's not the most Hollywood message, but that's what really wins the day, you know, pretty much that right there, among a couple of other supplementary topics. So, wishing you guys the best this weekend. That's what I wanted to cover today. And wishing you guys the best. So thanks for jumping in, and have a good one, everyone. Take care.